We just found out that Charlie Kirk got shot.
Joe Rogan has seen a lot of shocking stories come across his podcast table, but what happened during one recent episode left even him at a loss for words.
Rest in peace.
We're in
Fuck.
Fox News.
Jesus. 27 years old, maybe? 30?
News was breaking in real time. Reports that conservative commentator Charlie Kirk had been shot. Nobody knew the full details. Nobody knew if it was confirmed. And the way the story unfolded live on Rogan's show captured something raw, disturbing, and revealing about the state of America today. What Rogan said next wasn't just about Kirk. It exposed the deep divisions in the media, the dangers of political hatred, and the uncomfortable reality of how fragile free speech has become.
There's going to be a lot of people celebrating this. Wasn't even particularly rude. Who's tried to be pretty reasonable with people.
Around 12:20 p.m., Kirk was mid-sentence when the sound broke the air. A crack, sharp and unmistakable. For a split second, many thought it was a firework. But as Kirk clutched his neck and fell, panic swept the crowd. Screams erupted, chairs overturned, thousands scrambled for cover, ducking behind anything they could find. The bullet had come from above, later traced back to a rooftop overlooking the gathering. Police would discover a high-powered bolt-action rifle abandoned nearby. But at that moment, no one knew where the shooter was or whether more shots were coming. Witnesses described chaos, some people trampling others in the rush to escape, others frozen in shock as they watched paramedics rush the stage. Kirk was bleeding heavily, but still alive when he was loaded into an ambulance and rushed to a hospital. For the students who came expecting a heated debate, the day turned into something out of a nightmare. And yet this was only the beginning of the story. Within minutes, the campus went into lockdown. Sirens blared as students were ordered to shelter in place. Helicopters circled overhead. Armed officers swept through buildings and parking lots, searching for any sign of the gunman. At first, there was hope that they had already caught him. Two men were taken into custody as persons of interest. One found near the scene, another linked through security footage. But just as quickly as the arrests were announced, they unraveled. Both men were released without charges. The weapon was real, the shot was real, but the person behind it had vanished. The unanswered questions grew louder. How did a sniper get close enough to fire into a crowd of thousands without being spotted? Why was security so thin? And if the shooter had time to escape, was this part of a larger plan? Almost immediately, speculation spread faster than the confirmed facts. Utah's governor declared it a political assassination, framing the attack as part of a rising tide of violence in American politics. Supporters of Kirk pointed to years of heated rhetoric against him, while his critics claimed the real problem was a culture of anger and polarization that he himself had fueled. Some suspected ideological motives. Kirk had built his reputation by targeting college campuses, sparking protests wherever he went. Others wondered if the shooter was less political and more personal, someone with a vendetta against Kirk himself. But without an arrest, the truth remained just out of reach. The uncertainty only fueled tension. Social media lit up with claims, counterclaims, and conspiracy theories. And as the investigation dragged on, the country was left to wrestle with a chilling reality. Someone had taken a shot at one of the most recognizable figures in American conservatism, and nobody knew who or why. To understand the impact, you have to understand who Kirk was. At just 18 years old, he founded Turning Point USA, an organization that would become a powerhouse in conservative politics. By his early 20s, he was a fixture on television, podcasts, and speaking tours. To his followers, Kirk was a fearless voice, pushing back against what he called the radical left. To his critics, he was a provocateur who thrived on controversy. He built his influence not in Washington, but on campuses, where he debated students and encouraged activism. Supporters saw him as a defender of free speech. Detractors accused him of spreading division. Whichever side you fell on, one thing was undeniable. Kirk had become a lightning rod in America's culture wars. And now, with his life cut short on a college stage, those divisions seemed sharper than ever. The attack on Kirk didn't happen in a vacuum. In recent years, political rallies, school board meetings, even small town halls have become flashpoints. Threats against public officials have surged. Violence that once seemed unthinkable now feels disturbingly possible. The shooting in Utah raised alarms far beyond the conservative movement. If a figure as high profile as Kirk could be targeted in broad daylight at a major campus, what does that mean for future events? Will universities clamp down on controversial speakers leaders? Will political rallies be forced behind metal detectors and security walls? And what does it say about the state of democracy when disagreement turns into open violence? In the days that followed, investigators combed through leads, tracing ballistics, reviewing footage, and interviewing witnesses. But each day without an arrest left more questions unanswered. Families of students who were there demanded accountability. Critics of campus security blasted the university for being unprepared. And across the country, political leaders warned that this could be a turning point, either toward greater protection of speech or toward greater fear. One thing was certain: the attack would reshape the way Americans think about public debate. For some, it would become proof that free expression is under attack. For others, it was evidence that a climate of hostility had gone too far. Charlie Kirk once framed his mission around open confrontation. Sit down, talk it out, and prove me wrong. But on that day in Utah, the argument ended not with words, but with violence. The questions it leaves behind go beyond politics. What happens when we can't even gather to argue without fearing for our safety? What happens to a democracy when the marketplace of ideas becomes a battlefield? The shooter may still be unknown, the motive unclear, but one truth is unavoidable. When bullets replace debate, everyone loses. And until the country finds a way to step back from the edge, the risk of more days like this one will only grow. The scariest part of Rogan's reaction wasn't just his criticism of the media. It was his warning about what could happen next. He pointed out that Charlie Kirk wasn't some fringe personality with a tiny following. He had millions of supporters, many of them young, many of them passionate, and many of them deeply frustrated with the current political climate. If those supporters started believing Kirk was targeted for his views, Rogan suggested, it could push people over the edge. This is how history turns. A single tragedy can become a flashpoint. Rogan compared it to the Rodney King moment in Los Angeles, an event that didn't just make headlines, but sparked something much larger, something violent and uncontrollable. The danger, as Rogan saw it, is that America is already so divided, so raw, that it wouldn't take much to light the fuse. It could spark off some kind of real conflict, he warned. This is how tipping points happen. And as he said it, you could almost hear the tension in the studio, because everybody knew he wasn't exaggerating. But there was one more angle Rogan brought up that made the entire conversation even more chilling. Rogan reminded his listeners of something that had happened not long before: the attempt on Donald Trump's life. A bullet missed him by mere millimeters, grazing his ear. Rogan pointed out that if Trump hadn't turned his head at that exact moment, the shot could have been fatal. That was sheer luck. Fate, chance, whatever you want to call it. A slight movement separated life from death. And when Rogan compared that near miss with the news of Charlie Kirk, the point became hauntingly clear. Trump survived by inches. Kirk didn't. In Rogan's eyes, that wasn't just tragic. It was a brutal reminder of how fragile life is and how close America's leaders and influencers are to becoming martyrs in a political war that nobody wins. That comparison wasn't just about bullets. It was about the mood of the country. If this keeps happening, if prominent figures keep facing violence, where does it end? What happens when luck runs out? Which led Rogan to his final sobering reflection. As the episode went on, Rogan's tone shifted from shock to anger to something almost mournful. He wasn't just talking about Charlie Kirk anymore. He was talking about America itself. This is a dark day, he said. Either people are going to realize how insane this is, and we have to start having real conversations again, or it's going to get a lot worse. That's the fork in the road. On one side, a chance for people to wake up and realize that political differences shouldn't mean death sentences. On the other side, the possibility of escalation, violence breeding violence, division hardening into something irreversible, and that's why Rogan's reaction resonated. It wasn't polished, it wasn't filtered, it was raw, emotional, and deeply human. He didn't agree with Charlie Kirk on everything, but he respected the fact that Kirk was willing to speak his mind. In Rogan's view, that's what America is supposed to be about. Not silencing opponents, not celebrating tragedy, but confronting ideas with better ideas. Whether or not the country takes that path is an open question. Because right now, the atmosphere feels fragile, combustible, and dangerous. And maybe that's the real message Rogan was sending. The shooting wasn't just about Charlie Kirk. It was a mirror reflecting how divided things have become, and a warning about how much worse it could get if people don't step back from the edge. Now, for a moment's silence for Charlie.